delighted to be joined online by Eddie Jordan to look back on Formula 1. Jordan, the golden years. Jordan F1 racing from 1991 all the way up as far as 2005. And I suppose, Eddie, you're our last guest in relation to what we're speaking about Jordan F1. We've had Damon Hill, Martin Brundle on this week. Awful lot of kind words to say about Jordan and their time in Jordan F1. But for you, Eddie, was it always the dream and goal to have your own team under your name, under the Jordan name, competing at the highest level of motor racing, which is Formula 1?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, Damon and Martin, they both won races with Jordan, so I can understand that there was I won't say love affair, but there was a very good friendship between those guys, and ironically, we worked together, not in the same channel, but we worked together at the Grand Prix doing the television coverage. Now, Damon, of course, was the guy who won our first ever Grand Prix, and having lived in Ireland and being associated with him for a long time when he did live in Ireland. So it was a particular pleasure at that particular stage. In terms of Brundle, I love Martin, and I took him. I tried desperately to sign a guy called De Silva, who changed his name to Senna. And that didn't happen, so we took Martin Brundle, and that was 1982-83. And, it's still to this day, it's viewed as being the most exciting, most competitive Formula 3 championship ever, when Martin pushed him to the very last round and only got beaten by a point or two in the end. But nevertheless, Senna did win it. But, I believe that the reason why I got into motor racing as such, and you talked about the Formula 1 in 91, I was actually ran the team since 1998, and that was as a result of, I started in the business as being a driver, but I was quite late in starting, and very late in fact, and I was in the Marlboro team, and it was a result of being in the same team as Niki Lauda and Emerson Fittipaldi, James Hunt, etc., and then Alan Prost joined us. So it was Nicky who convinced me to set up a team. He thought I was not going to win a world championship, and he was right about that. And I'd be better off if I wanted to stay in the sport, which I did, that I should start a team. So full credit to Niki Lauda for giving me the push, the encouragement, and the belief that I could do this.
Yeah, and I suppose as your path in relation to starting teams, it started off in 1979 with Eddie Jordan Racing, and you competed around the UK in sort of various championships. You were successful, and then you made a sort of a bigger leap then in 1988 with the Formula 3000 team, and that was really a real big step and a real successful step indeed, because you won the championship in the year after 1989 with Jan Alesi.
And then, I've just mentioned Nicky, but the two most influential people on my mindset at the time was Nicky, which I've discussed, and the other one is like what you say. Jean Alesi won the championship with me. He was a difficult guy initially, and then he came to live with us in Oxford, and he became part of the house and became part of the family, so to speak. And it was his encouragement when I got him a drive halfway through his championship winning year with us in 3000. There was an accident with Michele Alboreto, and Jean Alesi, I was able to arrange for him to do the stand-in at the French Grand Prix. He finished fourth in that first ever race of his. He absolutely staggered people's views and impressions as to how a young rookie could behave and could be so quick. And as a result of that, he signed with Tyrrell, but I also got him a contract with Ferrari. And he was the one who said to me, Eddie, you've got to have total belief here. Believe me, I've seen firsthand what Tyrrell and Ferrari is like. You've got to make the chance, and you've got to make the change to go and start Formula 1 on your own. So that's when I got Gary Anderson and a couple of Irish guys together to start building the Jordan car. So well done to Jean for helping me to get that inner belief and the passion, the commitment to do the job.
Yeah, and you said there you got Gary Anderson on board as your chief designer, and then you made the big push in 1991 to set up Jordan F1. But one of your first early drivers was a real prodigy, a real enigma, a talent, and no one, I suppose, people could have predicted he would go on to have a successful career, but many people's career that he had is legendary and still legendary, and we all hope that he's recovering well. The great Michael Schumacher, but you lost him there to Benetton no sooner than you lost him.
Well, there's a couple of reasons. It was near the end of the season. It was Monza. We put him in the race in Spa end of August. We were on a knife edge. I wasn't able to pay the bills. With the engine manufacturer bills, there was little or no money to be paid to drivers. In fact, drivers used to have to pay me to drive the car. It was hand to mouth. You can't imagine. This was like out with the begging bowl, so to speak, because it was a really difficult time. Jordan didn't have and didn't want to have financial interests from the major manufacturers, whether it was Toyota or Honda or Ferrari or BMW, Mercedes, these people. So I wanted to do it on my own. It was a kind of a dream. Maybe it was a bit stupid in many respects, but I had this vision that I needed to do this myself, for myself, my family, my team, for Ireland, of course, because we were entered on an Irish passport and we had an Irish entrance license. So there was a lot of things that was driving me forward. So when the Benetton people came with Bernie, and I was really quite brutal about not letting Schumacher go unless there was a very significant amount of money. And the money, as far as I was concerned, we weren't a good enough team to be able to hang on to somebody like Michael Schumacher, and that was obviously self-evident. So the best thing is capitalise on it now, which means that I might be able to get to the end of the 91 season and hopefully try and see myself over that 91 season to start again in 92. And to be honest, that is what happened. Some people feel regretful about it, but let me please tell you, there was no alternative. We needed the money. I got good money from Bernie, I got good money from Mercedes, and I got good money from Benetton. So that helped us to pay the bills to keep going.
Yeah, and I suppose, Eddie, for the first few years in Formula 1 from 1991, for Jordan, it was all about sort of finding their feet and trying to make a steady progress year in, year out, and try, if realistically possible, to try and sometimes get in that top 10 positions and high up podiums, and try and, if at all possible, sneak a fifth or a sixth spot and get a championship point. And I suppose in the early years, what was the goal? Was it in terms of Constructors' Championship? Where was the real ambition? Was it to try and finish in the top 5 in the Constructors' Championship, or maybe was the real objective maybe to achieve maybe one possible podium throughout the year? Or early on, did you even envision a Grand Prix win?
No, to be honest, the early days were so tough and so ridiculous, and the competition, not just in terms of intellect and technical know-how and the belief that other teams had, that I was trying to aspire to that level. But I felt that we had something different. We had a small group of people who were totally dedicated and committed. But nevertheless, we had to go with drivers who had money. And as a result, you often find, and this is no reflection on them, but you have obviously a lesser driver standard or a driver quality when you have to do that. But I always say the most important thing and the best accolade that I would give myself if I was to do that would be to say, what was the thing that gave me the most pleasure out of all of those years and winnings and stuff like that? It's got nothing to do with motor racing, actually. The best thing was that I survived Formula 1, because the early years I didn't think that was now possible. But, as we grew in confidence and we grew in terms of ability to sell sponsorship and with the involvement of Benson and Hedges, of course, and other people who believed in us, we were able to gather some momentum. And as you point out, then things changed. Like in 95, did I think we could get points? Yes, I did. Did I think we could get a podium? I thought that was a little bit early, but then Barrichello came and gave us our first podium in Aida. And that was the first time for me. I mean, actually, Irvine was running in front of them.
Yeah.
And then things started to happen. And, finishing second, third in Canada, each time as we progressed and we reached new targets, and I said, Jesus, we've got to have to redefine the target now. Now let's see, can we have pole positions? Can we have fastest laps? Can we finish on the podium? And then when you get to the podium level, you have to start saying, well, look, God, we need to really push hard, get a bit of luck hopefully going, and win some races. Because even by today's standards, I think Jordan is one of maybe only 5 teams, 6 teams, certainly in the last 30 years that have won multiple Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Still a staggering statistic when you think back of. But, Formula One has changed. It's completely controlled by Mercedes at the moment. And if you say then behind that, you've got a little bit of Ferrari and you've got a little bit of Red Bull. But I don't believe there's any chance this current season or indeed next season of any new coming and making a surprise win. And certainly, do I see a team outside that group winning 4 Grand Prix, or 5 Grand Prix, or 6 Grand Prix, things that Jordan did? I don't think there is. That's not me being boasting here. That's just a fact of life. The whole state of Formula One has changed a little bit, and that small teams, inspirational teams, people who had great ideas and belief in themselves, I don't think they have a chance at the moment because they all, if you like, a lot of teams use Mercedes. Well, Mercedes aren't going to give you the best engine. They're going to keep them for themselves. I mean, that makes perfect sense. And anyone who believes that that's not going to happen, then I think they're kind of mad.
Yeah, and I suppose, Eddie, we'll just probably now, we spoke about Damon Hill and Martin Brundle in the past. 2 years ago, I did a Formula 1 Golden Years, and I spoke to Jarno Trulli and Giancarlo Fisichella, and those guys, again, were very complimented about you for giving them their break, and it sort of, they gave them that belief to go to the next step. But I just want to touch now on some of those drivers like Jarno Trulli and Giancarlo Fisichella, 2 real Italians, 2 fiery sort of characters, real slick sort of fast sort of drivers. And how did you, were you looking for young sort of fresh talent? You had the experience of Damon Hill, Martin Brundle, for the likes of Ralph Schumacher, Jarno Trulli, Giancarlo Fisichella, giving these guys these break, and did you spot their talent straight away?
Well, I think that was the modus operandi. Jordan was committed to finding young drivers, but it had a financial benefit too. You mentioned some of those drivers there. Look, Stefan Johansson, Jean Alesi, Michael Schumacher, Barrichello, Irvine, and Fisichella were all my drivers, and they all wound up in Ferrari. Well, the great thing about that is that Ferrari paid for their services because they gave them good contracts, but they also paid Jordan, the team, because I always sold them with a year left on the contract, so they had to pay me to release that contract. And that was how we survived. We added the money we got from that, we added that to the pot of sponsorship, we added that to the pot of what drivers brought us, and suddenly we had a budget which enabled us, like Damon Hill, to go out and finish, as we did do in Spa, finish first and second. We wouldn't have done that had we not had a really, really clever eye on the finances and how we could best spend the money and get the best results out of it. But regarding the 2 Italian boys, there's actually quite a sad statistic here. And that is, if I was to ask any well-versed Formula One historian and say to them, who's the last Italian driver to win a world championship? And people would say, well, would this go on? And they say, oh. And the reality is, the last is Ascari in 1953, I think. And I mean, that is a staggering statistic to think that all the great talent that you have in Italy. And I was trying to see, could I help somebody like Trulli and Fisichella? And Fisichella won our last race, the last race we ever won, which was ironically the last race Ford had ever won, which was the Brazilian Grand Prix in 2003. The problem is, I don't know whether the mindset of Italian people, and certainly young up-and-coming drivers, whether it's too maternal, it's very family-based, and they don't have that hard-nosed attitude that somebody like Michael Schumacher had. Nothing would interfere with what he wanted to achieve, whereas Italians, they just seem to have a kind of a softer view on life, on sport, and as a result, I've seen it firsthand. I thought both drivers, I mean, for Jarno Trulli to be on pole position in Monaco is probably one of the most technical and most difficult circuits. The guy has amazing talent. The same meant for Fisichella. But the reality is, could they go out and win a world championship? Well, they didn't. And I'm not sure they could now either. So there is a fundamental problem, I think, with certainly Italians. It doesn't apply, of course, to Spaniards, because Alonso was just a genius. But then he never got the world championships that he should have got, and he should be vying with somebody like Lewis Hamilton for 6, 5, 6, 7, 8 world championships. He was that talented, but you know, it seemed as if he chased the money after winning the first 2 with Benetton, and he never ever really got back to the same levels, even though he was paid enormous amounts of money.
Yeah, and I suppose, Eddie, I'll just bring you on to the other driver there, and Ralf Schumacher. And speaking to Damon Hill earlier on in the week, he mentioned that there was a bit of tension there possibly between himself and Ralf, given Damon's history with Michael going head-to-head for numerous years with Williams, and while Michael was at Ferrari competing for world titles. All of a sudden you have Damon, you have the younger brother Ralf, both teammates, both trying to do their best for Jordan. Was that difficult to manage as team owner, given that probably while Ralf was a bit wary of Damon, and Ralf probably wanted to be number one, and Damon, being an ex-world champion, probably felt he is the number one driver?
Certainly, as far as each driver in the team, I won't say pretend, but they give the impression that their teammate is their best friend. Well, that's absolute nonsense, because the teammate is the very first person that they've got to beat to give themselves, if you like, the kudos and the mindset, and then they think about beating everybody else. Don't ask me why that is, it's just there. Anyway, coming back to Ralf Schumacher, what we must remember is that Ralf Schumacher made this on his own. His brother gave him no support, in my opinion. Certainly from the time I saw him, and I was looking after Ralf in Formula 3000, in the equivalent Formula 2 in Japan, and that's where I took him from. His brother didn't come to the party in terms of supporting him, didn't come to the launch of the car, didn't do anything. Even though I had helped create Michael himself, and Michael was very responsible. Yes, he paid us off and still continued to do bits and things for the Jordan team, because he felt he let us down. Actually, he didn't in the end, so it didn't let us down, and so he remained a good friend. The only time that he ever got really, really excited was when he thought he was going to win in Spa, and he ran into the back of David Coulthard. And they both crashed, and they both didn't finish the race, and it gave the opportunity. There's no doubt that Michael, if he finished, was going to win the race. But you know, that's the result of this business. You've got to finish. You've got to finish first to first finish, and vice versa. And so, of course, he was upset. He was upset that Damon Hill could win a race after the situation that he thought that Damon Hill was sort of dead and buried, so to speak, in terms of competitiveness going forward. But who's the person who beat him in Spa? It was Damon Hill. And then that compounded when he found out that Ralf actually at that closing stage was quicker than Damon, and I had to give team orders to tell Ralf to make sure that he didn't pass. And I could understand how difficult that was for Ralf. I would say one thing, and it's important that maybe your listeners or whatever need to know this. Ralf Schumacher was an out-and-out gentleman of absolutely the highest order. He was well behaved. Of course, he was deeply upset that he wasn't allowed to win that race in Spa. He probably would have won. No, he would have won the race for sure. But Damon had led it right from the beginning. He qualified third. It was Damon's race, and that's how I had to see it, and that's how I wanted it to happen. And of course, Michael, he did me a favour, because Michael came all in a fluster and wanted to have a row immediately after that race. And he says, my brother will never drive for you again. I said, listen, Michael, it's very clear. There's a contract in place. There's a buyout in place. If you want to pay for his buyout, then you pay for his buyout. It's very simple. And eventually, at the end of the year, he did, and he went to Williams. I took Frenson, and Frenson won more races than he did that year. And in fact, Frenson won more races at Jordan than he did at Williams, which was quite surprising to many people. But I was very happy. I had the money from Frenson, I had the money from Benson and Hedges, and I had Michael Schumacher's £2 million that he had to pay for the buyout to get rid of, to take Ralph out of the team. So it was one of those things that, for me, at Jordan, it was a winning little structure of a deal, and I was happy about it. But to this day, I'm still extremely close to Ralph. He's a great winemaker, and I love drinking his wine.
Eddie, I suppose now late 1990s, you spoke about those victories in Belgium, those victories for Heinz-Harald Frentzen, the victory for Giancarlo Fisichella. But even before Giancarlo Fisichella's victory, I suppose significant things developed with Jordan. You lost the Honda engine to the Bar team. You had to get the more expensive Cosworth engines. DHL and Benson and Hedges withdraw sponsorship funding. So did you feel that was the right time for you to maybe to move the Jordan project onto someone else's hands? And after spending more than a decade in Formula 1, did you feel now was the time maybe to depart to pastures new?
Just a couple of things there that probably not many people necessarily would know. There was slight computer. Jordan never had the full factory Honda engine. It was always Mugen, who was the son of the great man Hirotoshi Honda. And there was a little bit of needle and a bit of very much Japanese culture that the main board of Honda didn't want to be seen to be beaten by a minnow or somebody privately in a small capacity, as Hirotoshi, Mr. Honda himself, when the Mugen Honda was given to us. But, you will never find, in my opinion, and I will say this, I will never find a more corporately correct company than Honda. They were magnificent, having won those races for them. And even when they went to BAR, they never won the same races as we did for Mugen, which was a sister part of that company. And as a result, not many people would know, but they completely and absolutely assisted us with the transfer to Ford, and they helped to pay some of that funding. And so as a result of that, I didn't want to leave them because I always felt that the Honda engine was better than the Ford engine. And it wasn't much longer after that it was shown that Ford weren't being able to reach the levels that they did with Michael Schumacher at the beginning of the 90s. So 10 years later, they decided to pull the plug, and they haven't been back since. And it's difficult to see if they'll ever be able to come back, because in terms of the share price and the value of the business and the value of the company, I'm not sure that Ford see themselves as a Formula One competitor or entrant, or in fact an engine supplier in the near future. But Honda, nothing but praise for those people. They were absolutely exemplary.
Yeah, and I suppose Eddie Jordan, if you look at today's spectacle of Formula 1 now, in terms of the qualifying with the three sectors, in terms of the Grand Prix itself, all these new sort of technicalities that have been introduced in the last few years, if you're watching the spectacle now compared to the 90s and 2000s, would you still, and you were a young budding entrepreneur, would you still have the sort of same real love for it as what you had maybe back in the 90s or 2000s? Would you still pursue it today if you had the resources to pursue it?
I think that in itself is it's almost impossible to answer. The reason being, when I came out of Ireland as a driver, went to Marlboro team, then, as you rightly say, the junior teams, Formula 3, 3000, and on to Formula 1. I had nothing in my mind. I was very, very fortunate. I married a young Irish girl, and she brought up the family and kept that stress and strain from me, and I kept the stress and strain of Formula 1 away from herself and the kids. So, would I do it again? It was a roller coaster. I would never, ever say that what I did was it was stupid, but it was also terribly fulfilling. And it gave me the encouragement. Would it have the same if roll on the years? It's just, it has changed so much. It has changed so much. Now, you've got 22 races. In my day, there was 16. 16 was a big burden. I think the future of Formula One will have to look at itself. 22 races is crippling the staff levels, the engineering people having to design and build new stuff. You're going to have, in my opinion, very shortly, 2 separate teams looking after. So each team would do 11 races in each, if that's what they're going to do. And they're now talking about increasing that number. But there's only so far you can do with chasing, the golden dollar, which the owners of it at the moment, that's possibly my if I have a criticism, it's that, and that is that less is more, and there's no point, in my opinion, lessening the quality, the interest, the spectacle that it is for the basis of earning slightly more money. What my view would be is to package it better, make sure that you actually get a better look at things, and make sure you get a better return and better exposure for the amount of races you do, rather than cramming in 22 into a race and not doing it all as well as that it is possible to be able to make it do it.
On that note, Eddie Jordan, an absolute pleasure talking to you on the airwaves to reflect on Jordan F1, the years 1991 to 2005. A great Irish success story for Irish fans who travelled in their droves over to Silverstone, to what we called the home Grand Prix, to follow Jordan, and who followed Jordan F1 all across Europe on their adventures through the highs and their lows. Eddie Jordan, a pleasure, mate. Take care.
Yeah, thank you for your time, and hope your listeners are happy, and we can speak again soon. Thank you.
No problem, Eddie.